Alright, hello and welcome to the 12th letter of Copperplate Majuscules. This is for the letter L. I have a Leonard Principal EF nib in an oblique holder with watercolour ink on. My X height is 5mm. So my majuscule height will be 15mm tall. Okay, so an L, really nice and simply, is almost all of a line of universal beauty. However, when we get to the bottom, we've got a loop to do that's going to go backwards and then it's going to cross and go forwards again. I'm going to do it here and then we'll analyze it. So that's going to go this way. And then we can come back and do something over here. Okay. All right. Let me clean that off really quickly. Just so I'm not going to have ink stuck on my nib. Okay, and then we'll get going. So on an L, you've obviously got your universal. If I move my ink before I knock it over, there we go. We've got your universal line of beauty right here. My universal line of beauty doesn't go as far over as it maybe should to balance the bottom, but that's because with an L, you don't want it to go too far over, otherwise you're going to create something that looks much more like a Z than an L. So an L should always go further back than it does forwards up here. Okay, so the bottom of my universal line of beauty is fully along the baseline. So it is parallel here. As soon as it hits, it goes straight along. But you can see my top bit is kind of not quite there. So I've stopped that a little bit short rather than carrying it on, just so that it's not hedging over and making it look like a Z. Okay, my middle third, as ever, is parallel to the slant line, as close as possible anyway. For an L, your legibility box is everything on this side up to and including the crossover at the bottom. So you can flourish over here on the left. So if I point that right here, do I have space above it? I do, a little bit. So that's a flourishable area, but this box is a no-go zone for bisecting or coming back through. I'll explain it in a second. We do have a couple of contained ovals. So we have one first off right here. And we also should have one that's partially contained right over here. So it's contained by the bottom of that here. So you can see in a letter like an S, that would come back up to form the oval. In an L, you saw that I stopped right here. That's quite common to do, because to do an L in one stroke is quite hard. It's almost as if you've got to change your wrist position when you get to this point to accommodate for the line of universal beauty going directly horizontal. So if you do your line of universal beauty and then stop, you can use that stopping point as your crossover. So it's going to hide behind that crossover point. We've also got this little bit right here, so I'll put that as a note down here. So use crossover point to hide. Stop, start. Okay, So we've got our cross right here. You'll notice that this cross is very, very far from 90 degrees. That's completely against everything that I've said so far about flourish. It's because this part of the letter is not a flourish. It's integral to the letter. So it would look very odd in an L. I can do it somewhere over here. I think I'm in frame. There I am. So in an L, if I do a similar one over here, so we can stop right here, drag our thing back, cover it up, whatever. If we try to make that into 90 degrees, then I'm looking at a very, very odd sort of cross. It's almost as if it wants to go too low down. Yeah, so I've actually had to accommodate this looking like it's crossing close to 90 degrees. I've had to accommodate crossing lower down, which has put me below my baseline. I'll explain why that's not great in a second. It's fine if you've got more of a bouncy script, like if you're doing a homogenized copperplate and modern script. I can't see an issue with that. But the point of the bottom bit of the L, I think I've got a black pen somewhere. Yeah, I do. The point of the bottom bit of the L is that this is a tiny contained oval. It's obviously stretched out, but it has a median point, which is just above your baseline. Cool. So it means that however far up you go from this point is however far down you can go. And we know that we're not going any further than the baseline down. So it means we can only go the same distance approximately up. Okay, so you are locked into those ratios right here. Okay, you can also in an L, let me get my oblique pen right here. Oh, I've picked up the wrong one, but that's okay. That's all right. You can in an L, I've got some space here. Yeah, roughly, I'm right there. You can in an L do a stroke like this, which is then parallel to the slant line. You can just leave that background there somewhere. So this should be parallel to the slant line. It is personal preference whether you do this or not. I tend to find that it depends very much on what is coming after the L for that point. So for example, if you've got, oh, I don't know, if you've got something like a an A or an oval base shape, it means that you're like, so if I had, I don't know what's the matter with my hair. I'm gonna put them on up. But if I had the word log, see, it's just not withholding the ink properly. I've had this nib a while, so it may just be that it's getting past its best. So it may mean, if I just slip that back into there. Cool. So it may mean on here that because it's a thick stroke, it's a down stroke, I'll show you on here, that I've got down strokes very near each other, whereas all my other ones are roughly same distance apart. So if that is a downstroke and that's a downstroke, that's a downstroke and that's a downstroke, these are roughly equal. This is looking very close. Yeah, so it would need, it's almost like it takes part of the place of your lead-in stroke. I tend to not want to do a lead-in stroke from an L unless it's flowing together. So I would only do this this downstroke right here if I had a letter that did not need or require an entry stroke. Otherwise it is going to look disjointed and out of place. Okay. So with an L, we have a lot of flourishing options. And I mean, some people do their L's all in one stroke, but I don't really think that's an option for me currently. We do have several flourishing options. For the ascender here, you could continue it. You could put it into a horizontal oval, a vertical oval, whatever you want to do with it really. So we can fill that space however we want to. Or what we could do, I think I've got enough ink on here, and am I still in frame? I think just about, yeah. Let me move it over slightly. There we go. We can extend the bottom. This is particularly good if you're addressing envelopes. So you can deliberately drop it lower. You can drop this part lower also to meet it so that it is looking balanced still. But I think it's personal choice at that point. Okay. Yeah, so we could drop it much lower, and then that would dictate where we can drop the following stroke from. So it's the same deal as before, that as low as that goes is as low as we can go over there, and as high as this goes is as high as we can go over here, roughly eyeballing it. But you don't want it to look out of balance, so then you can put, I don't know, we can put other letters up here should we need to. We can use this flourish to continue on. We can bring it up and around from our letter, but I personally wouldn't bring it through, just so long as you're missing that key area over here, so that you're not getting the legibility of your letter obfuscated. So we can also identify from here, and there's the middle bit, and there's my end. Going along the slant line, I should have roughly equidistant left and right from the crossover point. Pen, come on. There we go. So it's roughly equidistant from the point where it crosses over. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect, especially if you're doing it all in one stroke. It just makes it much harder. But you shouldn't have far too much on this side and then not enough on that side. As long as it's roughly equal, it's going to look all right. You are then also creating a confine. So you can even see on this one that I've done down here at the very bottom, that however far back I'm going here, just along my slant line here, I'm creating a confine of that letter. So I'm not going beyond that point. All the flourishing that I'm doing is within the most extreme leftmost part. Okay, that's not to say that you can't extend and maybe bring this back over somewhere. If you had enough space up here, you could, but I would just be aware that on your letter, your however far down, far left, this part of your L goes is going to create an almost invisible box for your L to fit in. And it's that box, so you can see, even with the flourish I've got, so underneath here, I've got a decent amount of space. I've roughly tried to keep it the same on both sides. I've spoken about this before, where it looks like a hole in a donut. So we've got roughly equidistant up and down from the loop. So roughly here to here is equal. So it's either called train tracks or a hole in a donut, so that you've got an equal amount of space in the flourish away from the middle loop. You can see I've also very sneakily tried to keep it the same as this gap. So it means that nothing is looking too smushed together. And you can even take your flourishing a bit at a time. So we can do an oval and leave it and then see what breathing room we've got left. A lot of this is actually really easy to identify once you get practice going with it. So I would first off just do simple L's, even if you're just doing half a contained oval, just like I did over here, just a half contained oval. And you can see I've got far too much space going this way compared to going that way. So I've got far too much space down here than I would have in my contained oval up here. So I could potentially create something that loops back in just to make that space a little bit lower. I could have a different flourish come back over, or I could always take my flourish up, back around, and then bisect whatever space that I've got left. Okay, so it's just about starting off a flourish. You can always add to it. I've said before, but just to reiterate, it's always easier to carry on from a hairline than it is to carry on from a downstroke. So if you are flourishing, keep it light. You can always go back in and add a downstroke at a later point. You saw, like, I just, because of my nib, I had to go back in and manually fill in a downstroke. It happens all the time. Yeah, so don't be afraid to just stop. There's no reason that you have to carry on, especially if you know that you've made an error or your letter isn't balanced. Okay, those are the best bits of advice I can give you. A L is really quite a simple letter. It's sort of like a C where it's high legibility. There's a lot of scope for ruining the letter, but it's just about sticking to the flourishable areas and leaving the legibility free. Right, thanks a lot.